Hi, I'm DuEwa Frazier, and you're listening to episode 13 of Nerdacity podcast. Today I'm going to recap episode 1 of the Bridgerton series on Netflix. Thanks for listening. So today I'm going to talk about episode 1 of the hit series Bridgerton at Netflix, created by Chris Van Dusen and produced by Shonda Rhimes. I've watched all 8 episodes of the series, but of course, I have to go back and watch it again. It's one of those series that you definitely want to binge, and you may need to see it 2-3 times because there's things that you miss. So the first episode of the series, and it came out, I believe, if not Christmas Day, maybe the day after Christmas or somewhere in that week. But the first episode is titled Diamond of the First Water. It's about an hour long, and it is narrated by none other than Dame Julie Andrews. And we all know who Julie Andrews is, from The Sound of Music. Do you remember that? The hills are alive with the sound of music. Okay, so I'm no Julie Andrews, but that was one of my favorite movies back in the day. It was one of those movies I could watch over and over. It's so sweet, and it gives us the taste of the whole culture in the UK, of course, if you have a lot of money and a nice big huge house and servants. So of course it was that lifestyle. But Bridgerton, I have to say, before I get into episode 1, really took me by surprise because I watched Downton Abbey. When was that? A few years ago, maybe 2, 3, 4 years ago. And although I watched it and I just, because everyone was talking about it, I don't think I really enjoyed it. There was very little diversity on Downton Abbey, and of what diversity they had, whether it was different identities, racial diversity, it was just very drab, very depressing, and, stereotypical to, representing the different classes. And with Bridgerton, we're pretty much, yes, we're seeing perhaps different classes of people. However, they're interesting. They're like interesting people. They have their own life purpose. They're not just being beholden to a group of other people as maids. There's people of color, there's gay, straight people, young, old. There's all kinds of different representation that I noticed on Bridgerton that I have not seen in more recent period pieces. I also tried watching The Crown, but I didn't quite get into that. I may revisit it. I have not seen The Queen's Gambit. I will most likely watch that next. But anyway, getting back to episode 1 of Bridgerton, it really caught my attention because, number one, there's although it's a string quartet, you're hearing contemporary music. Ariana Grande's Thank You Next, Maroon 5's Girl Like You. So the music is hip, and it's giving you this vibe that it's more contemporary, it's not as stuffy, but yet we're still getting the feel of, hey, it's the mid 1800s. The characters, the young girls, are getting ready for their marriage season where they're being presented to society. And when I say the young girls, I'm talking about the girls of the Bridgerton family and the girls of the Featherington family. And the characters that we are introduced to right at the beginning are the Bridgertons, which would be Lady Violet Bridgerton, her children ranging from the older sons to the daughters, Anthony Bridgerton, who is the oldest son, Benedict Bridgerton and Colin Bridgerton. And then you have the daughters, Daphne Bridgerton, Eloise Bridgerton, and the younger two, Francesca and Hyacinth. And in the beginning, we're being introduced primarily, I would say, to Daphne Bridgerton and then the three Featherington girls that are getting ready to be presented to society. So the scenes are showing both families in their homes, and there's quite a lot of to do about getting the girls physically ready, their hair, their jewelry, the ornate dresses that they're wearing. They're pulling them tight in these corsets, and you can just see that it's really, really painful just from the look on the girls' faces and the gasp as their mothers and their aides, assistants, or maids are helping to get them dressed. It looks very painful. You know, their hair is pinned up just so, and they are, to me, essentially, it looks like almost getting ready for war, except this is, 1812, 1813, and these girls are about it. And quite frankly, it's their mothers that are really about it, and the girls just have to follow suit and listen, and they're getting ready to be presented in front of the Queen. And what's so interesting is the Queen is Queen Charlotte, the Black Queen. And this, although Bridgerton is based on the popular novels of Julia Quinn, the author Julia Quinn, I don't believe, based on what I've read, that the characters were of diverse makeup in terms of racial, ethnic makeup. However, in the film adaptation, we're seeing a wide representation. And so Queen Charlotte is a black woman. And Queen Charlotte is someone who actually lived. She was a biracial woman, and, she was one of the royals. My understanding is Charlotte, North Carolina, was named after Queen Charlotte. That's why they call it the Queen City. And so very interesting, that whole history behind Queen Charlotte. I think that discussion came up when Meghan Markle married Prince Harry. So many people were up in arms about, there's going to be a princess who's a princess of color, who's a biracial Black woman, or someone who considers herself multiracial. Just the whole outrage by some people, both across the pond and even here. But Meghan Markle was not the first Black or multiracial royal, and now we know she won't be the last because her son is multiracial, and I'm sure there will be others. But in any case, so this episode 1, the girls are getting ready to be presented to the Queen, and this is serious because according to, the narrator and what you're seeing that's happening, the Queen sets the tone for the marriage season. She is the one who basically says, these girls are ready or these girls are not ready. When Daphne and the other girls go to meet the Queen, Queen Charlotte, is sitting high in her chair. She has all her servants around her. The room is clear in the middle, almost like a runway, a walkway for the girls to walk up to her with their mothers. The Featherington girls are presented first, and the three of them are practically squeezing through the door to walk down to the Queen, and they look awkward. One, I think her name is Phoebe Featherington. She is very tall, a little awkward. Then there's another one that's like middle size, and she's not as awkward, but you can just tell that she's maybe not as comfortable with herself. And then there's Penelope Featherington. She's got this bright red hair, and she's a little portly. She's cute, but she's a little portly. And, they're all squeezing through this door, and it's like they're just a little, they look clumsy, and they look very nervous. And so when their name is called out and the queen is looking at them, you can tell she has a very disgusted or disappointed look on her face. It's a kind of expression where it looks like someone smells something really stinky, because the queen's nose is so turned up. Her whole face is just, wrinkling at the thought of these three girls that look a little, out of place. She gives not such a nice look, and the taller, older girl, Featherington, falls right out. She faints. Now, obviously, because we saw in an earlier scene that her corset was being pulled so tight while they were getting dressed, that most likely that is the reason why she fainted. But I also think that she also fainted by seeing the queen look at her as if she was disgusted with her and her two sisters. So that scene was pretty interesting. It was pretty funny, actually. So then here comes right after them. Now here comes Daphne Bridgerton with her mother, and she's being presented to the queen, and you just feel this air that, of confidence with Daphne. She's looking really good. She's walking like she's floating on air. She's not nervous. She doesn't, of course, have all her siblings with her, so she doesn't have to worry about how they will all look being presented to the queen. She can just worry about herself. So Daphne gets to the queen, and the queen is quite pleased with Daphne's appearance and her confidence, her sense of calm, and, the whole dress and everything that she's been adorned with. The queen gets out of her chair, to everyone's surprise, and comes close to Daphne and says, "Absolutely flawless," or something to that nature. "Flawless, my dear." And Daphne smiles, and everyone is so happy. And now you know that Daphne has the queen's approval for her marriage season. Now, what we find out shortly after that is that there is a newspaper, rather some kind of newsletter or pamphlet going out all about the town. And we're hearing the narration by Julie Andrews that Lady Whistledown's newspaper has gone out, and there's a report that the queen is so happy with Daphne Bridgerton. She's being called the diamond of the season or something to that effect. And she's being highly lauded as a young girl who is the top prize and the young woman who should be highly sought after among the eligible bachelors here in Regency London. And so there's a whole big to-do about it. And so now, while all this is going on, we are also introduced to the story. We're introduced to Lady Danbury, and we are introduced to the Duke of Hastings, a young man. And so Lady Danbury is this stately, very classy Black woman who is known about the town. She is a socialite. She knows all and sees all. She has very piercing eyes and beautiful skin, and her clothing is just so, for lack of a better word, it's so rich and so detailed and so just very womanly and goddess-like. I mean, this is the kind of presence that this person has. And she is played by, let's see, Lady Danbury is played by, let's see, an actress named, I want to say Adjoa, Adjoa, Anja, or something like that. But she's got a beautiful name and a beautiful, beautiful face and presence in the series. Okay, I don't want to mispronounce her name, so I'll just call her Adjoa by her first name. And I can totally relate to having a very unique name. But in any case, Lady Danbury really gets around the town. I mean, she talks to everyone. At the first debutante dance, Daphne is there and all the young men want to talk to her, and her mother is telling her, let the young men come to you. Her brother Anthony is being very protective. He's kind of shooing off the guys that are coming toward her. There's one guy in particular who really wants to talk to Daphne at the very first beginning of the dance, at the early part of the evening. And her brother brings up some money that the guy owes someone. Oh, you have an unpaid debt. And it's like, as soon as Anthony Bridgerton, Daphne's older brother, says this to the young man at the dance, the young man is so embarrassed. He doesn't even try to explain it away or say, no, that's not true. I don't owe any money. This young man is like, the wind in his sails was totally taken away. So he just kind of walks off very slowly, and that was the end of him. And there were a few others that Daphne had her eye on at this first dance, and there's so many other debutantes there as well, and their mothers, and people are gossiping, and Lady Danbury's looking around, and the Featherington girls are also there, but none of the young men are really talking to them or dancing with them. It's really kind of sad to see. But you see that Daphne is like the star. It's her world. All the young men want her, and they're looking at her. So at one point, just when things seem to be going fairly well, and Daphne will, have a dance with a few young men, a man by the name of Nigel, he wants to talk to Daphne. He's very interested in her. So at some point they have a few minutes alone, but his demeanor is very aggressive, and he comes off, inappropriate. He tells Daphne that he's liked her for so many years and he was always watching her. And Daphne is like, oh, you were watching me when I was 5 years old, because this guy is clearly a bit older than her, maybe by 10 or 15 years. He seems to be even older than her brother, and he looks a mess. He's not a young man, like one that would be, age appropriate for Daphne. He looks a little older and a little worse for wear. And, but Anthony doesn't really seem to be paying much attention to it. So Nigel has Daphne alone talking, and, he obviously says something that really offends Daphne. And so she rushes off, but in a polite manner. And she's like, oh, I've got something I have to do. Yes, nice talking to you. And she's walking off because, hey, the event is still going on. And Daphne and none of the girls have been obligated to any one man at this event. They are welcome to dance with different young men and talk to them because their chaperones are all there. So there shouldn't be any, funny business going on. But instead of politely allowing Daphne to leave his presence, this man, Nigel, walks after her and is calling after her, almost like yelling at her through the party, through the venue. And it's really just, his behavior is really out of place and just not gentlemanly at all. And, it just really is like, wow, this guy is, over the top. So you can tell that he's not as calm and well-mannered or refined as most of the other young men in this environment, in this area. And just a note that we find out that Anthony, Daphne's older brother, is not very well mannered himself, because he has a little girlfriend that he's been keeping behind closed doors and having this secret affair with, although I don't know how secret it is, seeing that they had a little tryst out in public while his driver waited. And also his mother later mentions to him that, hey, you need to man up and be about your family duties and responsibilities instead of slinking around with the opera singer, and even his friend later, the Duke or someone else mentions it. Hey, are you just going to keep using up this girl, using up her time? Are you going to marry her or what? So Anthony he's the older brother in charge of making sure that Daphne is safe and protected and attracting the right suitor, but yet he is very occupied with this affair that he's having with a young opera singer who lives in town, who he often sees late at night after hours, but he doesn't I don't know if they had dating back then, but he doesn't take her out on dates. He doesn't bring her to his family home. He doesn't bring her around his friends. She is kept in the dark like a side chick. And it's really, unfortunate because you have here these proper young girls that are being introduced to society, one being Anthony's sister. And here you have the girl he's dealing with is not like any of the girls in his family or in his town, his area. This young lady is an opera singer. She's already working and lives by herself. And she is not of the class of nobility. She's not of a royal class or a wealthy class. And so that, in that regard, in the episode, it shows us the disparity among the citizens of this area. On one hand, you have girls that are very privileged and very well protected and who are being guided into marriage, into their marriagehood and their womanhood and things like that. And then you have young women who really are not protected, who are at the whim of, a man like Anthony who's confused and doesn't know what he wants to do. And Anthony begins to really mess up his sister Daphne's courting phase, because every young man that comes to see her, whether it's at the dance or to the house, he's finding something wrong with them. He's shooing them away. Oh, you're in my seat. Oh, you don't look right. Oh, you didn't tie your shoe. And whatever he says, these guys know what that means. That means they are done. They can no longer continue to pursue Daphne because the man of the house, her brother, found something wrong with them. And so poor Daphne starts out, the queen says she's the diamond of the season. So she starts out being highly looked upon as the young woman who will certainly snag the most eligible bachelor, but not before all the young men come calling to her to visit her at the home and any balls and dances that they have, to ask her to dance, to ask her for her hand to talk, to bring her flowers and chocolates and candies and whatever else they have for her. So Anthony makes it rather difficult for his sister in this first episode. His rudeness, his lack of discipline, his constantly going off to be with his opera singer makes his mental state and his discipline really shaky and very shady as far as his mother is concerned. So at this first dance, I want to go back to the young man, or the man who was talking to Daphne and she really didn't like his demeanor or what he had to say, Nigel. So Nigel comes after Daphne and she is desperate to get away from him. She doesn't see her brother. She doesn't see anyone she can talk to. But in her path, in her sight, right ahead of her, is a young, attractive Black man. And we find out he is the Duke of Hastings. She rushes over to him and says, "Hi, what is your name?" And he's really taken aback because he's like, who is this young girl talking to me, demanding that I give her my name? And he has this whole look on his face that's very confused, but that also is giving off a don't you know who I am kind of look, right? Because we already know he's the Duke of Hastings, because Lady Danbury insisted that he come to this dance, even though he's like, I'm not interested in getting married. He's only in town to settle his father's affairs or something like that, because his father recently died at the manor, and he's in town for business, and probably some funny business as well, because they later call him a rake. And Daphne says, she knows he's a rake because she knows her brother is a rake. And we can only, infer what that means. Basically, a man who is single and free and loose about the town with the ladies. Okay, so in any case, Daphne gets the young Duke's attention to basically distract this other guy, Nigel, from coming to talk to her. She doesn't want to talk to him anymore. She doesn't want to hear what he has to say. She doesn't want to go out on a date with him, or whatever the case is. She doesn't want him to come to the house. So she uses the Duke to pretend like they're having a conversation, and the Duke is like, what? He has no idea why Daphne is talking to him, and he's not with it at all. And you can tell he doesn't even really want to be at this dance. He's only there because Lady Danbury, who he respects and who apparently was his deceased late mother's good friend, the young Duke is only there to appease Lady Danbury. All right, so he's there, and Daphne starts rushing, talking to him a mile a minute, and he's like, what? Yeah, okay, and what is your name? And I can't remember if he quite gets out to her that I'm the Duke of Hastings. I don't think he does, because next thing you know, you hear Anthony from, down the way in the ballroom saying, Hastings, Hastings. So Anthony, Daphne's older brother, Anthony Bridgerton, sees the young Duke and says, Hastings, it is you. Hello, my good friend. And so before Daphne and the Duke can really talk, here comes her brother coming to chat him up. And Nigel is kind of watching this, and he knows to back off. So at least, Daphne was able to keep Nigel off of her at that point, right? But you get the feeling that, Nigel is not done making his case to, be her suitor or become her husband or whatever. But he backs off in this moment. Okay, so they're still in the ballroom, and now Anthony is talking with the Duke of Hastings, and they're chatting it up. And somehow, Daphne gets the point that, okay, this is a friend of my brother's, and he's also the Duke of Hastings. So I think she surmises that the tone she was using in asking him, what is your name, and kind of energetically forcing him to be in conversation with her, I think she realizes it was inappropriate, and her mother already mentioned, or someone already mentioned to her that night, the men are supposed to come to you. But Daphne has totally gotten out of that passive character, that passive young woman in waiting, because she went to the Duke to talk to him first. And of course, he didn't even notice her because he's not there to court anyone. He's only there really to please Lady Danbury. Okay, so she talks to, somehow or another, she ends up with her mother, and her mother basically tells Anthony, it's time for her to go. And between the two of them, they agree, that it's time for her to go, but she still ends up having like a last look at the Duke. And you kind of feel that there's something between them, but you're not sure what. If nothing else, there's some kind of strong feeling, maybe of even dislike, because they both rubbed each other the wrong way upon their first meeting. Okay. All right. So now we're moving on from there. And so now we have the scenes where, this is after the first dance, and the men are starting to come calling. Anthony is shooting them down left and right. He is blocking his poor sister's suitors hard at every chance he gets. And you can tell he's very frustrated, and he's just not happy. And we know that also Anthony is in this position because their father deceased. He is the older brother, and he has, an argument with their mother, Lady Bridgerton, that, hey, I'm in charge of protecting the girls and also protecting you. And he's being very strong and forceful in his tone with his mother. And his mother basically says to him, well, you're not doing a very good job. And if you keep up this type of behavior and blocking your sister's suitors and this lack of, being consistent with making sure she gets a husband, your sister Daphne isn't going to have a husband, and it will be your fault. And I was like, okay, come on, Lady Bridgerton, Bridgerton, tell him what it is, because your son is messing it all up for his sister. And it's like really unfortunate, because you can see whenever they go to a dance, like the other girls and their mothers are on it. I can't think of the girl's name, but there's one tall girl with blonde, very, very light blonde hair. There's one very tall girl at the dances, at the balls, who's like pushing the other girls. She's stepping on their feet. She's dropping handkerchiefs. This young lady is doing everything she can, really, in episodes 1, 2, and 3, to kind of thwart the progress of other girls meeting the young men that she wants to meet. You can tell it's just very competitive. There's a lot of tension in the air. And this girl is competing with Daphne, because this girl likes the guys that Daphne likes, or who like Daphne. And it seems that these two were once friends, but with this kind of situation, the girls vying for the best suitor that they can get, whether he's a prince, a businessman, a duke, or whoever, it's like every young woman for herself, may the best woman win. And so you kind of get that idea. But anyway, by the second or third dance, during episode 1, so Nigel has come calling to the house. And it's very clear that Daphne is not comfortable with this young man. He gets her alone in the garden one night when she's leaving a party just to get some air and to kind of clear her mind. And, he's arguing with her. He's basically telling her, I want you to marry me. And, this is going to happen. And he's being very forceful with her. And it almost looks like he's going to assault her, because she's there alone. And, in their culture, no girl is supposed to be alone with a man, especially not at night in a garden, where anything can happen, without her chaperones, without her parents or her guardians around to protect her and fend for her. And so in this moment, I kind of see Daphne as being, although she's going along with the tradition of getting married at a very young age and letting her family and the society kind of groom her to do this, it still seems like she's thinking on her own. She's thinking on her feet. She's thinking about what she's comfortable with, what she wants and what she doesn't want. By this time, she and the Duke have been around each other a little bit, but they're exchanging very rude words at dinner. You can tell that there's like a dislike with them, like they're being polite because he's the brother's friend, but they're also really not digging each other because they have to sit near each other at dinner one night, and it's very uncomfortable for both of them. The Duke has a problem. His father was not a nurturing father who loved or was proud of his son, because he was born with a speech impediment. His son, who was the Duke at the time, the father, rather, was very cold toward him, very unloving, very critical, and very, he isolated him. And so Lady Danbury kind of raised him and took him under her wing as a young boy to help him speak and help him learn to read and boost his literacy skills and all of that, because the father basically said to him when he was a little boy, hey, you're a big disappointment to me. You have a speech impediment. There's something seriously wrong with you, and I'm not proud of you. And it was so, so awful. And we see these flashbacks of the Duke as a young boy with his verbally abusive, emotionally abusive father, who is played by a Black man. And you're like, wow, this young man didn't barely have a chance. His poor mother deceased during giving birth to him. And, during the birth, the father mentions, oh, I finally have a son. I finally have a son. And later it's mentioned, oh, what a blessing that, the boy doesn't look like the father. He looks like the mother. You kind of get a sense that maybe his father was not his father. Why did they have such trouble having a child? And how is it that the mother, who did decease, unfortunately, how was she finally able to get pregnant when it looked like he was much older as it is? And so you kind of, the show kind of gives you a question that, hey, maybe the young Duke is not actually the big Duke's son, like biologically. And maybe that's why, the father was so cruel toward him. And of course, the boy did not look like him. But anyway, so we get these flashbacks, and the Duke obviously has some emotional problems because he has a friend named Will who he boxes with. And it's not the kind of boxing that we're used to where they have on, nice trunks and, boxing gloves and headgear. No, it is like rough, rugged, and raw. They are in a boxing, A boxing sort of, that stage, or, they're enclosed in this little boxing ring. That's what I wanted to say. They're in a boxing ring, but they don't have shirts on. And I don't even think they have shoes on. And they're fighting with their bare hands. And Will is just punching the Duke, whose name is Simon in the film. He is just punching him left and right. He's punching him in the chest. He's punching him in the face. And the Duke is getting messed up. And it seems almost as if he's like he wants this beating. Like he needs these beatings because he's so emotionally crippled by his father's memory and by these awful, awful feelings about the father. And it's making him feel, low self-esteem. It's making him feel less than. And now he's around Daphne and he's around her family. And they're just like this big family who's really close. And I think it's really bringing up a lot of issues for him. Okay, so I'm going to fast forward, right? And so Daphne does not want Nigel. But at a party, when Nigel accosts her, she's got to punch him out. And then the Duke kind of finishes him off. And it's just really, really oh, Nigel, get out of here. Haven't you had enough? But Nigel is so upset because he's basically, I'm going to tell everyone that you were in this garden and blah, blah, blah. And you were here with me at night and no one's going to like it and no one's going to want to hear of it. And you'll be ruined if they think you were here in this garden at night doing something inappropriate with a man when you're supposed to be a pure white as snow virginal debutante who's waiting on marriage. And so Nigel is just wrecking shop. He's just ready to tell everybody, run, tell that, what happened, and really kind of exaggerate it because he's really upset that Daphne does not want to take him as a suitor. I mean, she's really fighting it left and right. Okay, so at this ball, and this is either the second or third ball of the episode, I can't quite remember if it's number 2 or 3 of the coming out parties. The young Duke, Simon, and Daphne devise a plan that, hey, Daphne is look, I really need some different suitors and I need some quality suitors. Can you please pretend to be my suitor and I will pretend to be amenable to it? And she's like, it will help me attract more quality suitors. And he's like, great. And this will keep the young women and their mothers off of me because none of them will want to compete with Daphne, who is the diamond of the season. So it's a ruse. Neither one of them want to be together, but they both are going to use each other for some form of protection. And basically Daphne's going to use the young Duke to help her attract other men. I guess with the whole notion that, men only want you when other men want you, that kind of thing. So they emerge from this party arm in arm, and the whole town sees them. The Featherington girls, Nigel sees them, all the guys see them, their parents, their mothers see them, Lady Danbury sees them. And of course, by the next day, the town gossip, Lady Whistledown, who writes her newsletter, talks all about it. Oh, we have this new couple, the Duke of Hastings and Daphne, yada, yada. It's so wonderful. And the Queen is loving it, but the Queen doesn't love it as much heading into episode 2 and 3 because she has a young man who she wants to meet Daphne. So the way the episode ends, basically, the whole town thinks that Daphne and the Duke are together. They are not really together. They are forming a friendship. They're spending a lot of time together, right? But you're getting the sense that they are getting emotionally closer, but it could be more of a dependence because they're both in a precarious situation. Nigel tries to blackmail the family. He basically finds Anthony and Daphne and all of them in public. It's like they're walking in a park, and Nigel is like, look, your sister is not all that pure. She was in the garden with me. She was, doing some things that she shouldn't have been doing. And if she doesn't marry me and I don't get the acceptance of her hand in marriage in the next 2-3 days or whatever, I'm going to tell everyone that she's not pure, that she was doing something inappropriate, and it's going to ruin her chances of marriage. So the whole family is shaking in their boots. Everyone's afraid that Nigel is going to make good on his blackmail. And Anthony is beginning to think, oh my gosh, I should prepare Daphne to marry this tool because he's not going to let up and he really has us in a corner. But they decide to investigate Nigel and come to find out he has plenty of skeletons in the closet. Something to the effect of getting one of his maids or someone pregnant and not taking care of the woman or the child, and as soon as they brought that to him, Nigel slinked off. He was on the next train smoking to Scotland or wherever. So they got rid of Nigel, okay? But then there's still the problem that Daphne still does not have a husband, and people are beginning to wonder, what is the matter? Is the Duke serious? Even her brother wants to know, hey, are you serious about my sister, or are you not, or what is the deal? All right, so that's Daphne Bridgerton. But we're also introduced to another story of a young Miss Marina Thompson, who enters as the cousin of Lady Featherington's husband, the Lord Featherington. And Marina Thompson is to our surprise, she is a diverse character. She is a young Black girl who is coming into town from another town. Her parents or her father have sent her to this area to live with her cousins and to be presented in the marriage season to find a suitor. But what's interesting is the young Miss Marina finds that she is indeed preggers. Lady Featherington is shocked, quite shocked and appalled. They're wondering what to do with her. They tell the poor girl she's got to stay in her room until they can figure things out. And it really becomes a mess, right? And so this whole time you have Penelope Featherington, who's really kind of being a busybody, her and young Eloise, Eloise being one of Daphne's younger sisters. They're both talking and gossiping and really talking about how they don't really have an interest to get married, that they really want to focus on their studies. And so you also get the feeling that while most of the girls are going along with societal expectations, well, hey, you have some girls that are rather bookish. You have some girls here who love to read and research and investigate, and they're a little nosy and very chatty, I might add. And Eloise smokes cigarettes late at night with her brother Benedict and tells him what's on her mind. She travels around with a notebook, and so does Penelope. And these girls, so they're a little bit different than the other girls who the only thing on their mind is getting married because that's what's been, put into them. And so it's quite interesting to see their storylines as well. We begin to really wonder who Lady Whistledown is. How is this lady able to get all the gossip and all the tea about everyone in the town? Because, who can see all, know all, and be all? Now, I began to think that Lady Whistledown must be Lady Danbury because she goes to all of the events and everyone talks to her and she asks questions, and she's at the Queen's events and she's with the mothers, and then she's with the debutantes, and then she's with the Duke of Hastings. And so she seems to know everything. So, but things are not always as they seem. So episode 1 was pretty good. I may not be giving it a summary that's second to second, but I'm giving you the gist of it. So that's episode 1. And another thing I want to say, the costumes are spectacular. The contemporary songs are great. The classical music is great. The scenery is wonderful. And you get a feel of a real kind of whimsical environment. Of course, environment that's filled with a little chaos, right? But another thing that I really appreciate as I'm watching is that there's a great amount of diversity of characters and just so many different personalities and characters to look at and observe. All right, so that was my episode recap of Bridgerton series, the episode 1 Diamond of the First Water. So I hope you will listen to other episodes of my podcast, Nerdacity. Feel free to tweet me at NerdacityPod1. Follow the podcast on Instagram at NerdacityPodcast. And also check out my videos here at YouTube. Visit my author site at www.DuEwaWorld.com and support future episodes of this podcast by visiting anchor.fm/DuEwaFraser. Thanks so much for listening. Take care.